The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or of any particular state. The territories are controlled by Congress. That includes Washington, D.C. They have feelings. See also their license plate.
I think this goes back to this might go back to the Articles of Confederation, because I think the smaller states wanted the federal government to control the territories west of the Appalachians and not the states themselves.
Yep. Yeah. Well, if you look at the original land grants of the 13 colonies, first off, that's getting back into the whole surveying problem. But most of those colonies, their charters say that their land stretches to the Pacific.
And the states, they'll have borders at the Appalachians. Like, no.
Yeah. The thing is, even at the time those charters were made, the answer to that was, no. Let's start with the fact that some of those charters stretched into territory that was kind of in the process of being claimed by other people. And we're not talking the natives who no one cared about. We're talking like Spain.
And France.
And France. And I mean, no Europeans controlled those stretches anyway.
So I think Ohio would have been Pennsylvania if that.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up, and I have no idea what state we would have been. I would have to look that up. I think I would have technically grown up in Georgia or something. Yeah. So, it was just that was not a feasible boundary for these states.
The longest states ever. Okay. Really, yeah. State from sea to shining sea, Pennsylvania from the east coast to the west coast.
Yeah. And I think they agreed under the Articles of Confederation, if I remember correctly, to cede that territory. Because if they weren't really losing anything by it, if New Jersey or whoever didn't control the Puget Sound, I have to draw lines on a map. I don't remember. There are charts, but I don't want to look it up right now.
If we ever, maybe I'll do that. If I animate this, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. So the states ceded control of the Northwest Territories and what have you. The Appalachian Mountains became basically the back of the United States for practical purposes.
One of the few powers that the states gave up to the federal government in that era.
Yes. And part of it was, again, going back to the surveying problem, the bickering of the states about who controlled what bit of the territory. Because no one had gone in and drawn a proper border, and even if they had, it's not like there was a marker for it. This forest that had never known borders before did not care what state it was in.
And I think that's one of the reasons for the French and Indian / 7-Year War.
Yes.
Border dispute.
Yes. Because the boundary between French Canada and the British colonies was really fuzzy. Technically, George Washington personally started that war. So, yeah. So, in order to make control of it consistent, it needed to be at the federal level. The problem with this is that there is no possibility of self-governance in this. And none of our current territories really have border disputes because they are islands. So, what is the border of Puerto Rico? Yes.
I think the only island in the Caribbean that's separated is the Haiti Dominican Republic.
Yeah. Yeah, and the border of that is, I believe it's technically visible from space because it's a lot to do with deforestation. The border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic is depressing.
Yeah, Haiti's pretty much stripped everything, and the Dominican Republic isn't.
Yeah, no, and that's another one where I know just enough to know that I don't know the full thing, but also just enough to make me really sad. But with Puerto Rico, they don't have border disputes because the whole island is its own thing. With, the Mariana Islands, yeah, which island is part of the group is a conversation. But once that is established, it's not like you're, accidentally on one of their islands. You can be blown there during a storm, but once you're there, you know that that's where you are. So it's not like a trackless wilderness or anything. So the original reason for this section doesn't exist as much anymore and doesn't give the people who live in those territories the right to self-government. It's nice that nobody has more say than anyone else, except in the sense that Congress is setting the laws, but it still needs reform.
Because right now, pretty much everything in the kind of United States is we've claimed it all.
Yeah, well, and people talk mostly about Puerto Rico in part because it's big and in part because it's right there. But the abuses in some of our Pacific territories are appalling and need to be dealt with.
I'm surprised that during the Mexican-American War that we didn't claim more of Mexico than we did.
It was a matter of how much effort we were willing to put in part. And honestly, we took the parts that we thought were important.
To us, like California and the gold. We didn't know.
Well, California had declared its own independence, thank you very much. But Texas, a lot of the more northern areas, because there's desert in that part of the continent, and even now, vast amounts of that area are empty. I have driven through rural Arizona several times because my grandparents lived in the middle of nowhere. And you can go for, half an hour, 45 minutes on a freeway, 65 miles an hour without seeing signs of anything. And then you go through a town of 15 people and you're at the other side and there's nothing for another 20 minutes.
Because I was wondering two things. I was wondering about one, what if Mexico City was part of the United States, or if we would name it. And two, talking about the border wars, across the border, it'd be a lot easier to build a border wall a little bit south there because Mexico gets smaller as it goes down. It's like a little tiny thing instead of that big line that we have now.
Yeah, well,
it'd be Mexican. It'd be the American Central America wall.
Yeah, border with Guatemala is much smaller than the border between the U.S. and Mexico.
Because that
And a lot of that is actually through rainforest, so that's its own kind of complication.
But yeah, that'd be because then again, that breaking Mexico, that'd be a lot more states. That would be a lot more states down there.
Yeah, there's 30-something states in Mexico. I used to know all of them by name because I learned it in Spanish class, but I don't remember most of them because it is not information that I use ever.
So that would be 80. We would have 80 states and 160 senators.
Yes.
And still 435 representatives.
Yes. And Wyoming would rule the world.